Welcome to this explainer. Today we're unpacking a really fascinating text by an author named Shay Feng. If you've been anywhere near the wellness space lately, you've probably heard a million people tell you to look within. But this text, it completely flips that modern wellness script right on its head. It absolutely challenges the very foundation of what we think it means to grow spiritually and intellectually.
Let's start with this wild thought experiment from the text. I want you to imagine, just for a second, that you woke up right now and literally every single memory was gone. Every experience, every face you've ever known, every lesson you've ever learned, just wiped. If that happened, would you even know who you are? Kind of scary, right? But hold on to that feeling, because it's absolutely key to everything we're about to cover.
Okay, let's dive right into Section 1, the inner cultivation trend.
We live in this time where looking inward is basically seen as the ultimate fix-all answer. And look, our source material doesn't dismiss this entirely. Not at all. It actually starts by acknowledging that the principle of inner cultivation, which is championed by Buddhist philosophy and modern masters like Osho, has a really clear purpose. The ultimate goal here is refining your consciousness and perfecting what the text calls the non-material structure of life. The whole idea is that your inner nature is already complete, right? And turning inward just brings you back to divinity.
And this illustrates exactly why inner cultivation is completely valid. The text points out that appearances, the physical things we see and touch every day, are essentially just illusory external expressions. They're just the surface layer. The true reality, the actual essence of who we are, only lives in the structure of our consciousness and our life. So when you think about it that way, looking inward makes perfect logical sense.
But moving into Section 2, the danger of going inward.
Here is where the text introduces a massive paradox that we really need to unpack. Because going inward, it isn't always the safe haven we think it is. The crucial point is this. If you have absolutely no external foundation, what exactly are you cultivating when you close your eyes and look inside? Aren't you basically just meditating on emptiness? If you haven't brought anything valuable into your mind from the outside world, you are quite literally trying to draw water from an empty well.
The text highlights some genuinely serious risks to isolating yourself from the world. It vividly warns that if you just retreat inward with nothing else, you might end up cultivating a mouse or a snake within yourself, essentially turning into a kind of monster. Think about a child raised by wolves, right? They become a wolf child because they only know what is immediately around them. People in totally isolated bubbles often think their tiny little world is the entire universe. Without outer cultivation, you're running the risk of just cultivating a really narrow, extreme, and frankly, arrogant perspective.
Which brings us to Section 3. What makes you, you?
To understand exactly why this isolation is so dangerous, we have to look at the actual anatomy of the self. We have to figure out what makes you, well, you. Take a look at this excerpt from Chankun Buddha. It argues that I is essentially just a memory structure. Even if you woke up on another planet, the text actually uses a hypothetical 10,000-year world as an example. As long as your memories were intact, you'd be happy knowing you came from Earth. Your memories, your social connections, your past experiences, these external things are the exact raw materials that construct who you are. If your memory just vanished, there would be absolutely no I, zero. There would be no self left to cultivate, which naturally begs the big question. If the I is just a collection of memories, where does our underlying awareness actually originate?
Well, the text explains this using a really fascinating concept called the universal alaya consciousness. It describes this as basically a massive universal record. Your consciousness isn't just sitting there in your physical brain, it's simultaneously recorded in this vast universal framework, shaping your past and your future. In fact, the source text boldly states that the ultimate purpose of existence in the entire universe is to actually create this awareness, which establishes the true, logical foundation of the cosmos.
The core equation here is incredibly simple but deeply profound. I equals awareness. Without awareness, there is no I. Seriously, think about it. If a person is born completely without the ability to see, hear, taste, smell, or touch, who would they be? Without any outer experiences feeding data into them, they would be utterly disconnected from reality, almost like a person in a vegetative state. Awareness is painstakingly built through outer experiences. The text gives us some really grounded examples here. For instance, you couldn't recognize your biological parents if you were adopted at birth and had literally never seen them. It also uses the example of joining a specific group called Lifechanyuan. You obviously wouldn't know you were a part of it unless you actively went out and joined it, right? Understanding the vast world through your physical senses is absolutely required to build the awareness of who you even are.
Now, let's look at Section 4, the ingredients of consciousness.
This is where the theory becomes highly practical, and honestly, I absolutely love this analogy from the source material. The text compares enlightenment to cooking a meal. Inner cultivation, that's simply the act of cooking. It's the stirring, the heating, the combining of flavors. But outer cultivation, that is the vital process of going out and gathering the ingredients. It's the vegetables, the flour, the oil, the salt, even the pots and pans themselves.
Because guess what? You cannot cook a meal out of thin air. It's physically impossible. You can't just sit in a completely empty kitchen, turn on the stove, and expect a 5-star feast to magically appear. Just like dreaming of becoming a brilliant scholar without the grueling external accumulation of elementary, secondary, and higher education, it's just a fantasy. You have to go out and get the raw materials.
And that brings us to Section 5, bridging inner and outer. So, how do we correctly bridge this gap between our internal and external worlds? How do we stop pretending to cook thin air and actually start preparing a real feast of consciousness? The author pulls 0 punches here. They argue that beginners who can't even tell north from south or wheat from weeds, yet loudly shout about inner cultivation, are literally just cultivating illusions. By ignoring the outside world, they are just hardening themselves into stone. True inner cultivation is the pursuit of the well-learned, the people who have already built a rich, diverse external foundation first.
So here is your action plan, straight from the text. To truly refine our consciousness, we have to seize every single moment we are alive to gather these crucial ingredients. We need to fully experience life. Get out there and explore widely. Read extensively. Absorb the hard-won wisdom of other people. And then, once we have stockpiled all those rich ingredients, we use inner cultivation to continually reflect, verify, and transform that thinking into something profound.
But, a quick word of warning from the text, both of these things must be nurtured together. Outer cultivation gives you the material, and inner cultivation processes it. If you only ever gather facts from the outside without ever turning inward to actually cook them, you become nothing more than a library exhibit. You're just a storage bin for unused, dusty knowledge.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want you to ask yourself, are you just sitting in an empty kitchen with your eyes closed, hoping for a magical feast of enlightenment? Or are you actively out there, in the vibrant, messy world, gathering the rich ingredients you actually need to grow? Get out there, gather your ingredients, and only then, fire up the stove.